and we won't have to cry no more.
Co-owners of Key Dialogue. A couple of days ago, my friends and I had the fantastic opportunity to be able to attend the Salt Lake City Black Lives Matter March. Before I do get into that, I have a few things I do want to address. This isn't just some journalistic opportunity that we're jumping on to take advantage of. We have much further intentions other than just to interview some random people and make videos out of it. With this channel, I'm really hoping to convey a special message here. This message is more than any sort of politics or any specific idea. This video and the many videos that we do hope to make are made for everyone. They're made for all of our Republican and Democrat friends, or any party or people who choose to even not associate with a party. We see a lot of anger and a lot of hate circulating around social media. I see a lot of different people trying to prove each other wrong and get into fights over politics, myself included. Like, I'm not perfect. I don't feel like anyone's perfect. I feel like all of us have probably gotten into a heated discussion with someone we've disagreed with, whether it's about politics or just anything in general. With this channel, I'm not trying to push any sort of political bias. Well, there is one bias, and that is a bias towards the need to prioritize our relationships with people, and that everyone has something good to say. I believe that politics is one of the leading things tearing apart our country. What does it matter if our economy is doing fantastic if from within there's a mental civil war? These current issues plaguing us aren't one-sided, and we need to see both sides of it. We can't be arguing and hating on everyone around us. This is not a white people problem or a black people problem or any sort of race problem. This is a racist people problem, a bad people problem. Our fellow black brothers have a lot of fears, man. Whether they're valid or not valid, they do have fears. They feel that there is racism. They feel that there is police brutality, which there is. We saw that video of George Floyd getting kneeled on by that officer. And this is something that we need to address, no matter how big or small of a problem it is. We need to all come together as a community to help our brothers and sisters out. This isn't about the pigment in our skin. This is about helping each other as the American people. We got to stop trying to hate on each other and hate on people who are more privileged than us. Delegitimizing someone as a person just because they are privileged is quite silly. We can't generalize a whole group of people just because of some statistics, because everyone has different backgrounds and everyone has different things, and we can't just make assumptions about people. Relating to this topic, a church leader shared a fantastic point with me. He said, "In a marriage, you learn this. My family is very hard on each other and likes to poke fun at each other. And when they do this, it's not because they're actually mean. It just means that you're part of the team and means that they love you." So one day we were having dinner at my family's house and we were continuing this practice. We were laughing and joking around and teasing her. And, I didn't think much about it. Then after, she talked to me and said, "Hey, why are you doing that? Some of those things really hurt me," and I of course felt awful, and I then changed. The main takeaway from this story I got was compromise. For instance, what if he had just said, "Well, we weren't being mean, and you just gotta stop being so sensitive because we really do love you"? No, he cared about her feelings. And that's what we have to do about this with this situation. We have to care about what other people have to say. It doesn't matter whether it's legitimate or not. And, that's really what I have to say with that regarding, those thoughts. So going over to what the video is about. Going to this protest, we really learned a lot. We interviewed many different people, and well, there were many different points which we agreed with and some that we disagreed with. And but that is not the point. What the point was we were there to open up discussion, to see how people really felt. And that's what we have to do. The most exciting part of this protest is when we got to the march. We started with about 500 to 1,000 people, and by the end, there was a good 3,000 to 4,000 people all marching with us. And what I just really enjoyed the unity that was presented. There was so much energy and people of all kinds all standing together to support this cause. It was amazing to watch. One thing that did make me sad, despite all the amazing things that I did see at this protest, was that being the distaste toward all the police officers. I'm not here to argue about the police department, but the way that these people are being treated, being yelled at, being sworn at. And individually, no one knows who these cops really are. We get mad at people for judging and discriminating against us for the color of our skin, yet we judge and discriminate these officers for the color of their uniform. Are there bad cops? Of course. Are there bad people that exist? Yes. Discrimination isn't only tied to racism and sexism, it's tied to everything. People being made fun of for their weight, or maybe dealing with a mental illness, or being left out, or not being invited to a party because people think you're annoying or not social enough, or eating lunch in the school bathroom because you felt too embarrassed to be seen sitting alone. Being made fun of for maybe the way you speak. One story that really broke my heart. So at the protest, we decided to interview one of the cops. And talking to this cop, he brought up a story, and he talked about how at a protest about a week prior, he was just there making sure the protest didn't get out of hand. He talked about how a group of people approached him, and they said some really awful things. They came up to him, they said, "We're going to follow you home, we're going to rape your wife right in front of you, we're going to kill all of your children." And, they're saying some really awful things to this officer who they had no idea who he was. They had no idea who he was on the inside. And that just, really broke my heart. We have to see past, it's not just a uniform. There are people behind these uniforms, real people. But, my concluding thought is this is not anyone's problem to fix, but it is our moral obligation as a society to come together to help each other with whatever our needs may be. Right now, our fellow Black Americans are facing racism and a lot of fears, and that is valid.
So you're one of the organizers for this event?
Yeah, I plan to be more affiliated with them soon. My cousin is one of the main organizers of this event. Yeah.
All right, cool. What brings you out here? What makes you feel the need to come out here and protest and do what you're doing?
I am here to stand against racism. I'm here to stand against police brutality, and I'm here to utilize my voice as a Black person in America because our voice matters, and we are in a point in America where we are being killed and we are still being oppressed, but we have the opportunity to have a voice in this current situation. I believe that Black people, myself included, need to utilize their voices against racism and police brutality.
What brings you out here today to support this cause?
As a Black man, I think it's important to see what's going on and see what brought me out is that it needs to stop. The violence needs to stop. We need to hold police accountable. All people should be held accountable. But more importantly, the people who are paid to serve and protect should actually serve and protect.
I've been supporting this cause since it started with the Black Lives Matter movement, since it started with Mike Brown. And so I try to contribute any way I can and every way I can to make sure that my presence is here and that my support is there for Black people in America.
Just standing up for justice, being an African woman myself, having a 9-year-old that's African American, and it scares me the world that he's gonna have to grow up in, and it means a lot to try to be part of the change to make sure that it's not as harsh anymore. So that's a big reason why I came out.
Well, I'm a former elected leader, and I am a mother of a black son, and I'm also a minority in different ways. I can't ignore the pain and the suffering and the injustice, and it's time. This can't stop. This can't be a moment. This has to be a movement, and change has to happen, and it has to happen in the banking industry, in the mortgages, and in the justice system, and in our capitals. I mean, it needs to happen.
Uh, the main reason why I'm out here is so I'm protesting for my niece, my nephews, and just future generation of blacks and minorities, so they don't have to deal with being racial profiling or deal with police brutality or wondering why their dad or brother or mother never came home. So, and I'm also here for all those that has been victim of police brutality that we don't know of, and the heartache that their family is going through right now because their family hasn't been brought justice yet. So, yeah, just supporting anti-cops. It's police brutality is not needed. Racial profiling is not needed. Just because I'm black doesn't mean I'm a threat. Just because I'm black doesn't mean I deserve less. Just because I'm black doesn't mean I'm not human.
I just feel like there, we're going through a really crazy time in our country right now. We're in the middle of a pandemic that's already disproportionately affecting the black community. But in spite of that, people of color and black people have decided that now is the time to make this very important stand, to fight for very important issues that we can't ignore any longer. And so I feel like I just wanted to come and be another body, be another person representing and amplifying their voice. Okay. And that's why I'm here today. I hope that, I think that in this time right now, we have a terrible president, terrible leaders of this country who are absolutely not interested in our best interests or in the best interests of black people. And in this time of near chaos in our country, someone's going to try to grab some power, and if it's the oppressed, I think that's a good thing. What's your opinion on police brutality? Do you feel it's a prevalent problem in the U.S. other than just a handful of people? I think that the institution of the police in the United States is a flawed institution that is overly militarized, undertrained to handle the kind of situations that they're expected to handle every day, ill-equipped to deal with the actual problems that are in the street, and overly equipped to deal with imaginary problems. And so, yeah, I think that police brutality, police overreach, over-policing, over-militarizing the police, and systemic racism within the police are all serious problems. And yeah, I think this is a worthwhile cause, even right now in this time when the risk is higher because of coronavirus. For that same reason, I think that any government leaders or officials or police who contribute to the breakdown of orderly and safe protesting and deploy tear gas and cause chaos that prevents protesters from protesting in peace and safety need to be held accountable for the extra danger. Besides the regular danger of police brutality and violence at protests, it's amplified by the coronavirus pandemic.
I mean, if it wasn't an issue, we all wouldn't be here. So, yeah.
Police brutality is a huge problem nationwide and globally. We look at the protests that are happening in Chile, where they're standing against police brutality. Police brutality happens everywhere, and we have psychological evidence of why it's an inevitable thing because of things like the Stanford Prison Experiment, because of the Milgrams Experiment. We have evidence that this dynamic that we have will inevitably lead to police brutality, and the problem is the system. The system is inherently flawed, and the system is why we see these things, and we need to change the system.
It is the problem in America, and if it's news to someone, that's probably because they're white. But for black people, they're made aware of this problem from the time that they're little children. My husband, who's black, he was made aware of the problem when he was about 4 years old, when his parents had to teach him what it was like to be black in America and what it was like to, what he should do and what he should be aware of and expects to come because of the color of his skin. And so It is the problem for Black America. I think it's one of the most pervasive ways to execute racism in a way where there's no justice.
The criminal justice system as a whole needs to be addressed. I'm a retired police officer.
Okay.
And I worked with some great officers that cared about people, and I worked with a handful of very abusive men that loved their guns. And we attract some very abusive people.
Okay.
And we don't have to. We don't have to accept that.
Yeah.
We can do temperament tests to make sure that we're not allowing abusive people to come into the force, and we can train good people that want to help other people how to shoot a gun.
Yeah.
So you can choose who creates your workforce. And right now law enforcement is choosing some very, very abusive people. Yeah.
I think we have a racism issue in this country in general. I think we have bad actors in law enforcement who are using their authority in the worst possible ways. It's very clear that racism runs within police departments, and it's up to our leaders to eradicate that and to hold people accountable.
I think it's literally the most important thing right now, and Trump isn't doing shit about it. No one cares, and this is why this is happening, because it needs to be fixed.
Well, I mean, I come from the East Coast, so I come from where they had stop and frisk. So I think it is a big issue. I think it only became more prominent because everybody has a camera in their pocket.
All right, cool. How do you feel? So I feel like with this case coming up, there's a lot of people's stories coming out, and a lot of different people out here with different stories, different names of people coming out who've experienced racism. Do you feel that you yourself have experienced racism, or have you had any friends who feel like they've experienced racism?
Yes, definitely. That's why this is very personal to me, because not only have I experienced it here, moving here, because I'm not originally from here, but my son has going to school here, going to a very suburb area of here, and having to be one of only 3 Black kids in the school, and dealing with racism that these kids that are obviously taught, but they don't realize what they're doing at the time, and how hurtful it is, and to have my son come back and ask questions because he doesn't understand why they're laughing at him.
Oh yeah, especially racism against specifically Black people is a huge problem in America, but in places like Utah, I'd argue it's a bigger problem, where we do live in a majority white society. We do grow up in a culture in which white people aren't necessarily as educated as they could be on Black people and Black struggles. So when we interact with, say, a police officer, or interact with someone who is even Caucasian, we see exuberant racism, and we see small little microaggressions and actions that you can tell are just a product of ignorance.
Absolutely. Every single person I know who isn't white. My stepdad's from El Salvador, so he's a Central American. I've watched him. The police treat him differently. My husband, like I said, is Black. All my friends that are people of color 100% have been treated differently, from microaggressions to life-threatening situations where they're pulled over. All my brother-in-laws, they live in a really nice neighborhood in Chino Hills, California, and every single one of them have been pulled over because they're driving in their own neighborhood, but they're driving nice cars, and they're seen as suspicious because of their skin. And so there's not a single person of color, mixed or otherwise, that I know that has not experienced racism, from microaggressions to macro, where their life was threatened. So absolutely.
What do you feel the proposed solution is? How do you feel that we approach this problem? How do you feel that with the police force, how do we fix this problem? Or what's our stepping stone towards it?
Okay, I believe that step 1 is what we're doing right now, is opening up a nationwide conversation of that we have a problem. And I believe that if we're going to move forward, we now need to, as a nation, accept the fact that this is a huge issue and this problem needs to be solved, and this problem has been happening since the inception of the police force, and it will continue to happen throughout the rest of our days if we don't do something now. And I believe that step 1 is understanding that we have a problem and assessing the real issues and who's really affected most disproportionately by police brutality.
I think we need to listen to the Black voices that are proposing what do they propose for change. You know, I've seen a variety of different measures that cities should be implementing in order to you know, in order to lower the incidence of police violence. I think that we're giving too much military equipment to our police. They're overfunded and overprovided, oversupplied with military gear, and that encourages them to behave in a militaristic manner. I think that, you know, I don't have the answer. I don't know if it's defunding the police, if it's abolishing what we have as the police right now, but the police are currently expected to come out and be social workers in the community, basically, and deal with social problems, which my wife just graduated with her master's degree in social work, and she is nothing like the police officers, you know? She's the kind of person who's supposed to be out helping the community, not soldiers with guns and body armor and tear gas and tanks, and all the shit that they have is totally unnecessary.
I don't think there's one solution. You know, racism is embedded in almost every part of our society, and we have to start whittling away at it through multiple layers and through multiple angles. Because when I talk about the banking industry or the mortgage lenders, I'm talking about the fact that black people can't get loans, and that banks turn them down, and that mortgage companies don't give them loans, and they can't own homes. And we all know homes are a great way to invest. I mean, it's just part of it. And it happens everywhere, and we have to demand better from all angles of racism if we're ever going to end this problem we have in our country.
All right, so do you feel that the racism that a lot of people feel that is here is very systemic? It's beyond just police officers. It's beyond a lot of things. It's everywhere.
It is everywhere. It's always been here. It's always been here. And it goes way back to the start of this country, and we never righted the wrong of slavery. We never did that. We just said, forgive and forget. Well, that didn't work. That didn't work. It's not working. You, me, I don't have ancestors in my genealogy books who are in shackles, for God's sakes. But does my son, who I adopted? Absolutely, right? That's real. And how do you overcome that just by forgetting and forgetting? No, it doesn't work that way.
I feel like right now, with the cops who murdered George Floyd, they got charged with they got a higher charge, which is what we've been fighting for, all of this. I think that when cops act the way like that towards black people, they need to be called out. They need to be punished. They should get their badges taken away. They shouldn't be cops anymore if they're going to treat people like that. And I think that's the answer, is to attack at the root instead of letting it happen.
Well, there are systems involved, right? It's not just about hiring good people that care about each other, that want to do good work. There are also oppressive systems at work, oppressive school systems. There's still redlining. There's not access to good education. 60% of the women I work with coming out of the prison are from Weber County. They're women of color. There are 8 inpatient beds for them in Weber County. We push them into the criminal justice system. We push them into prison. And we don't need to do that. We need to address the school-to-prison pipeline.
Oh, sorry, dude.
We need to address the school-to-prison pipeline. For girls, it's the sexual assault-to-prison pipeline. There's a movement for black girls in Utah because they're the most abused. So, I mean, there are systemic issues of oppression that have to be dealt with, systemic issues of poverty for people of color that have to be dealt with. It's not just a handful of asshole cops, right? It's not it's systems.
You feel that they're set up for failure?
Yes. There are systems of oppression, not just a handful of asshole cops. I worked with some great officers. I worked with some wonderful officers. They cared about people. They weren't the popular ones.
It has to be systematic. It's not just a couple people. It's not just getting a couple people in jail. It's not just convicting a couple people. It is systematic. The whole system has to change. The whole police, the whole social justice, and the whole the whole police system has to change. It has to be much bigger than just these small, because this is the tip of the iceberg. This has been going on as long as police have existed. This kind of problem has existed, and it's pretty new to white America because we've seen it on our phones for the first time and we've had to watch it. But black people have known about this. Black people have been like fighting against this.
I think first we need police reform. So I would say we need to get to the polls, and we need to make sure police are being held accountable. So I think if a police officer unjustly kills somebody, or just kills somebody in general, I mean, there should be a level of checks and balances. They should not be allowed to one, kill somebody, and then even if they get fired, to be hired somewhere else. I think there should be a level of, we as people should know what each officer's history is, because they are policing our neighborhoods. So we should know if somebody is more prone to violence. So we should be aware of that, and then we can go back and hold our mayor, hold the police chief, hold them accountable, and ask them questions like, why do we have a police officer who has X amount of charges against them still roaming the streets and policing? Because it doesn't just impact us as people. It impacts the police force, and it creates a division. It creates a us versus them, and that is dangerous.
Yeah. Okay, so you feel that we should be able to have a system, one, police reform, but you also feel that we should be able to know like what these cops' histories are by being able to maybe look up their badge number, being able to know what's up.
Yeah, we need more transparency in the police force. They shouldn't be able to hide behind the shield.
I think bringing awareness, I think this is a part of the change. It's going to take a long time. This isn't something that's going to be fixed overnight, but definitely people speaking up, people that we finally feel like we have a voice now and we're being heard. So I think this is definitely the first step. I don't think there's one perfect solution, but definitely that we're going in the right direction.
What is your opinion on a lot of the riots, the violence, and the burning down of buildings that's going on in some areas of our country? How do you feel about that?
I think that is all rage against the machine. It is anger that is not surprising. You know, we should not be surprised by the destruction going on. People are fed up. And the people who are murdering people on our streets, like Trayvon Martin, and all those people on that sign, all the people on these signs, like, nobody's being held accountable for these murders on our streets, whether it's a cop or a citizen. It's absurd, and it has to end.
I do not understand. Well, I do, and it's because of ignorance, but I really don't understand how people are surprised by the fact that looting is happening. You look at how black people have been treated in America. You look at how black people are currently being treated in America. These riots and this looting should be expected. Like, this is an inevitable thing. If you're going to kill us disproportionately, and you're going to, as a police officer, who's actively committing police brutality, as police officers who are covering up for the said cop, for the cop that's like making a mistake, and the people who are sympathizing with them as a whole, they're a part of the problem. You know, and they are why people riot. Like, if you're going to kneel on the neck of an innocent man for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, expect a riot, expect looting, expect anger, because we are angry in this country. And rioting and the looting are a part of that, a huge part of that.
Yeah, so from a lot of what I'm gathering from people is a lot of people are saying, you know, like, they're not like super supportive of the writing, but they usually will say things like, we have to be understanding, we have to understand why this is happening, and that, you know, or like Martin Luther King said, I heard someone say that, you know, writing is a voice of an unheard people. Right.
Right. We do, like, we can learn a lot about the present from the past. And I think that a mistake that a lot of people make when we look at Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement, we detach it so far from our own situation that it's kind of like, oh yeah, Martin Luther King said this, and Martin Luther King just becomes this prop and this talking point. But we do understand that we are experiencing some of the same things that black people experienced during Martin Luther King's era, and we can draw obvious parallels, like police brutality, like white supremacy, which is alive and well in America, like racism, which is alive and well. like there are parallels, and Martin Luther King is very much relevant in what he said about like what it means to protest, and protesting in general still very much matters. It's very important to our movement and what.
So these protests involve millions and millions of people. That is very difficult to predict, and it's very difficult to say that millions of people represent one cause or one movement. I'm a young white woman, and I've been marching with Black Lives Matter since I was 19. But every single protest I've gone to has been peaceful. It has been led just like this by Black men and women who want to elevate their voices and do it in a peaceful way. That's, it's very vivid and there, but it's not violent. So the violence I see is the exception. So I can't speak for that. I've never been a part of it. I have seen that there's been a lot of white young males being involved with the violence. It's never, the BLM movement is not associated with the violence. That's not and they will deny it, and so will their followers.
It's people that are pissed off. It's people that don't know. I would say, it's an unfortunate side of protest, because 95% of them have been very peaceful. But at some point, there's a breaking point when you feel like you're not heard. Eventually, you're going to act out because of that very reason. So it's when you're heard, and when you don't see reactions by police, then you're able to come to a better solution. But until that happens, you're going to see that all across the country, because people are mad. We're talking about George Floyd, but it goes all the way back to Emmett Till. People are pissed off, and until something is rectified in our country, I worry. I worry about the world that we're inheriting, or the world that we're passing down to the younger generation like you and your friend.
I don't agree, but it's understandable because you started with violence. We tried to do this peacefully for so long, responding with violence because that's all you hear. That's all you respond to. You know what I mean? That's what the police, the government, everybody, they respond to violence. And that's why this is happening. It's unfortunate, but it's understandable.
Since you feel there's racism kind of like that you might have experienced or that you might have had friends experience, do you feel that the solution or the stepping stone is coming out and having their story be heard, coming out and talking about it so it's brought to awareness?
Yes, that is definitely what this is all about, and actually people being willing to listen now, and I think that's what the big change is people are now taking the time to listen to, Black people, and why this is happening and why people are being killed because of this. So.
Hey, I really hope that you guys enjoyed the video. I feel like we got some really cool interviews and we really got to see how people felt, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and we look forward to making more great videos with some great messages. Take it easy, guys. Be safe out there. A lot of commotion going on. We still got the pandemic going on too, So, make sure to be safe, and we hope that you guys will watch some of our future videos. Thank you.